Hey everyone, as always Jarek here, and welcome to possibly I forgot the hat. Yeah, I remember. It doesn't matter that it's completely warm in this room and I turned the heater on for a long time and it's going to be really damn hot, but can't have a video without the hat. Okay, let's try that again. Hey everyone, as always Jarek here, and welcome to possibly the worst Halo game in the franchise. Now stop before you leave that angry comment down below. I know Halo 5 exists, but whether Halo 4 is the worst game in the franchise or not really depends on one question. How much do you value Halo multiplayer? I like it a lot, so for me Halo 4 is easily the worst. Don't worry, I'll be talking fully about multiplayer soon, but I want to cover the campaign first. Let's start where I usually do, the graphics. Now for a 2012 game, this game actually looks really good. But that's sort of a problem, because this was a late Xbox 360 exclusive, and the 360 could not handle this game. It ran at a sub 720p resolution, and it was supposed to be 30 FPS, but oftentimes that would devolve to 20, and sometimes your 360 would just explode. It did not run well. This was that time, that era, where every single game wanted to have extremely high resolution textures. This is also when the original Rage was have texture streaming problems, so it kind of makes sense. To explain it in a better way, the game looked too good for the Xbox 360. But that also doesn't say a whole lot, because that describes almost every game that came out on the 360 late in its lifespan. With that said, none of that really matters anymore, because Halo 4 is now on PC in the Master Chief Collection. And I'm pretty happy to say that the port is, in my experience, very smooth. Now, I'm not going to be doing a full breakdown of what this port offers. It does have a lot of enhancements over the base game, like all the other ports that the PC version do. The big thing I really want to stress, though, is that it feels so good finally being able to play this game at a native resolution that you want to see and a frame rate that stays stable. And I have to say, at 1440p this game looks really good. Yeah, it's kind of obvious that it's a bit of an outdated game, but still, it looks pretty impressive for what it is. But here is where we get into the bigger issue, and that's the art style. Personally, I think the art style for the environments look really nice. The game provides you with plenty of locations that will make you just want to stare off into the distance, or wonder what the whole place is for. This is the good in 343's art style. However, there's a big side of that that's bad. Unfortunately, 343 wanted to meddle with previous art styles, and this included entirely changing the enemies and Spartan armor. How does a bird-looking creature turn into a turtle? How did a grunt get uglier? What the hell happened to the elites? None of these things are explained in the game. They usually have a one-off line and then they're just brushed off and never mentioned again. And this is a good segue to the story, because right at the beginning of the game, you're attacked by an elite. Master Chief reasonably questions why an elite is attacking you. They were supposed to be in alliance with the Covenant. And Cortana just says,
"A lot can happen in 4 years. Either way, he's probably not alone. We should be careful."
Yeah, that doesn't help. That just raises more questions. For that matter, the story as a whole just leaves me very conflicted. I know how I feel about Halo 4's multiplayer. I've known that for years. But when it came to the campaign, I only beat it once or twice back in the day and then never touched it again. And my experience was a resounding meh. I just didn't really care. I never thought it was great and I never thought it was bad. I had some levels I remember not liking too much, and some I remember really liking. Not as much as the old Halo games, but liking more than hating. So I didn't know how that opinion would change when I came back into it. And when I came back into it, my opinion on the story is that I'm even more conflicted. If you're unaware, you were still playing as Master Chief in Halo 4. It's supposed to start years after Halo 3 and continue on with that story. Although the trilogy officially ended from Halo 1, 2, and 3, so this is an entirely new self-contained story, just in the same universe. That said, Halo 4 started the worrying trend that things would make a lot more sense if you knew about the lore behind Halo's universe. Basically, if you read the books, things would make more sense to you. And if you didn't, oftentimes the cutscenes would be an exposition dump that told you a lot of what's going on in the story, and they would raise more questions than answers. For the most part, you got what was going on, or at least what you really needed to understand to continue following along with the story, but there are so many things that just don't make sense unless you already know more. It should never be expected of the player that you need to go out of your way to understand more about the game. Stories should be self-contained. And I say this started the worrying trend because we all know how Halo 5 ended up in this regard. For the record, Halo 5's campaign is easily the worst in the franchise, and I'm not contesting that. So yeah, the story in Halo 4 has to do with the Forerunners, and as things usually go with the Forerunners, the story is a bit convoluted. I don't want to try to explain this. I feel like reading the Wikipedia page will do a much better job at explaining it than I ever could. But then there's also the extra little bit between Master Chief and Cortana. Cortana's AI is starting to break down. She's starting to go rampant. And this starts the awkward storyline between Master Chief dealing with this rampant AI losing her mind. Basically, Master Chief's got lady problems, is what I'm trying to say. And it's really odd seeing this in Halo. And once again, a lot of the things happening here just leave me with more questions than answers. The writing doesn't strike me as bad, just really out of place for what style of game this is. For that matter, the quality of writing on certain characters is kind of all over the place. For example, this guy here exists basically just to be a dick.
I understand what you think you saw.
Think?
With all due respect, sir, I know what I saw.
And with all due respect to you, soldier, I'm not willing to jeopardize my ship because of the hallucinations of an aging Spartan and his malfunctioning AI.
He has no character development, he has no point for existing. This guy's sole purpose is just to get in the way and be an asshole. We don't even know his motivation for doing so. He runs the Infinity ship, but it seems more like his writing is just to say no to anything anyone is saying to him. It does lead to this satisfying cutscene.
Commander Lasky, pursuant to Article 55 of UNSC Regulation 12-14572, I'm ordering you to remove that AI's data chip and retire it for final dispensation.
I don't want to. You don't want me to.
Remove
Please.
the chip now, Commander.
Please. I don't want to.
Give me that chip.
The didact has to be stopped. If you won't do that, I will.
I am ordering you to surrender that AI!
No, sir.
Lieutenant! Arrest that man!
Captain!
Arrest him!
Captain!
Get word to Earth that trouble is coming. Cortana and I will do what we can back here.
That almost makes up for his writing, but then you literally don't see him for the rest of the game. That's it. That's the conclusion of this character. Like, why does he even exist? What's the point? But then on the other side, you meet this scientist, and I did genuinely feel bad for her.
It's not a matter of choice. It took 3 months, and the biggest starship the UNSC could throw at it just to relocate it here. Unless you're a lot stronger than you look. It's not going anywhere.
Can you give Cortana access to the station's supply manifest?
What for?
If we can't move the composer, we have to make sure the didact can't either.
Oh, wait. We have years of work invested here.
Inventory lists 7 excavation-grade Havoc mines. Just one of those would turn this base into a piñata.
I'm sorry, Doctor. Keep routing your people to the evac centers. Once we take care of the composer, you won't have much time.
I'll, make sure the nukes are primed so you can detonate them remotely. Maybe next time you rescue us, you can give us more time to pack.
Next time.
It's not so that the writing itself of these characters is bad, it's just that it fails at pulling the emotions it's supposed to. They're trying to pull specific emotions, but there needs to be more reason other than, this guy is mean, you don't like him, be mad at him. Meanwhile, with the scientist, I understand the problem, I understand her motivation. She put so much of her life into this research, and we're about to blow it all up because we don't have any other option. I'm going to feel bad for that. I understand her backstory, I understand her motivation. If a character is going to be a dick, you need to have something more to them other than just, they're a dick, and that's it. We did get a lot of good memes out of that cutscene though. And since this is relevant to the graphics, presentation, the story, the music, the problem I always had with Halo 4's music is that I just don't remember it playing in the game at all. Now, I did listen to the soundtrack outside of the game plenty in the past, and it's really good. But if you asked me, if you pointed out one track in the soundtrack and said, where does this happen in the game? I would not be able to tell you. Apparently, a reason for this problem is that the music was really quiet in the original 360 release. If that's the case, I can't confirm it, but it's plausible. With the PC port, this is definitely not the issue. I could absolutely hear the music, and it really is great. This is where I planned on playing some Halo 4 music for you. In fact, I edited an entire version of this video with entirely Halo 4 music in the background, uploaded it to YouTube, and then it got picked up by YouTube's Content ID system since Halo 4's music is apparently in YouTube's system. So I had to replace all that music with the music you're hearing now. Cool. Awesome. Thanks, YouTube. Trust me when I say the music's really good. Okay, now we can finally get to the gameplay. And for the most part, honestly, it still feels like Halo. It's still a mixture of guns, melee, grenades. But there is a few distinct changes they've made. For starters, they took that sprint armor ability that they had in Reach and just gave everyone sprint. This will matter for the multiplayer, remember that. For the campaign, it's fine. That said, the way they tried to balance in sprint was that they made it so that your shields take forever to recharge. Despite the fact that you can sprint at any time, Spartan abilities still came back in Halo 4. And these are pretty varied in what you'll get. The good news, and I remember being very happy about this when Halo 4 first came out, they got rid of armor lock. They replaced it with this light shield thing, which is way better. I still don't like Spartan abilities for reasons I'll talk about later, so again, keep that in mind. However, the thing I want to talk about the most, honestly, is the sound design. These weapons sound totally different from Bungie's weapons, and personally, in my opinion, I like 343's weapon sounds way more than Bungie's. They sound like actual weapons. Take the assault rifle, for example. Halo 3's assault rifle sounded pitiful. That's way better, and I don't see how anyone could argue otherwise, no matter how big of a fan you are of Bungie. And this is true across almost every single one of the weapons in the game. They sound more powerful. The only one exception I can say to this is I don't really like how the battle rifle sounds. It just sounds weird. It also looks a little weird, I'm not a huge fan of that, but it functions the same as the other battle rifles now. At launch, this wasn't the case. At launch, it was a 5-burst. Why? Thankfully, they did a weapon balancing patch that changed it back to a 4-burst as it should be. But the next major significant change they made to the weapons is that automatics suddenly became way more useful. Thank God. I have the uncommon opinion that I actually like automatics being useful. Keep in mind, I am into competitive Halo. I just like there being more weapon variety than only utility weapons. How much were you going to use the assault rifle in previous Halo games? To double melee someone in Halo 1? That's about it. The automatics do not ruin or replace the utility weapons. You still have the advantage if you have a battle rifle. I just want the assault rifle and other automatics to be a little more useful. And in the case of campaign, this is just a good thing. I don't see any downside to this. Next up come the enemies. You're fighting the Covenant again, which, you know, it makes no sense, but whatever, I'll handle it. They play pretty much as they always have, and the Covenant are still fun to fight. But the big additions are the Prometheans. Now, I remember these enemies actually being a lot bigger of a problem than I had now. I remember the Promethean Knights to be tanky bullet sponges that were just a pain to deal with. I remember those little dogs to be obnoxious as hell. I remember the armor guys to be hard to shoot. And then that's when I realized it. The only difference between then and now is that I was using a controller compared to a mouse and keyboard. Playing this game on a mouse and keyboard makes this game so much easier. Those fast little dogs running around are pretty much a non-issue with a mouse and keyboard. Just shoot them once in the head and they're done. The Promethean Knights can do a lot of damage, but again, it's a lot easier to be pretty precise shooting their head. And the Watchers that revive enemies and give passive buffs, they're a lot easier to deal with a mouse and keyboard than a controller. I distinctly remember the last few levels in Halo 4 being frustrating and annoying. Something more akin to, say, Halo 1's The Library, but not as bad. Coming back and playing it now, I'm just more indifferent about it. I didn't really struggle with it. I never struggled with it before, but I found it tedious before, whereas I didn't get that experience now. It just feels like another Halo 4 level. Not quite as good as the earlier ones, but I mean, not terrible. And to be honest, that's how I feel about the entire game. Yeah, it can look really good and the presentation's nice, but it never really has the heights of the previous Halo games. The story is pretty confusing, but it's also never terrible. How I feel about Halo 4's campaign is just sort of... it's fine, I guess. If we're just talking about campaign and if multiplayer does not matter, Halo 4 is not the worst in the franchise. That's Halo 5. But multiplayer does matter. Whether you play it or not, it's pretty important to me. So, Halo 4 sucks. Let's talk about the multiplayer. Halo 4 basically took every bad idea from Halo Reach and expanded upon it. Hey, you liked loadouts in your Halo game, right? No? Well, too bad, it's back and even more in-depth. Choose any weapon you want to spawn with, choose any armor ability you want to spawn with. There's a bunch of this stuff that doesn't need to be there. Being able to choose whatever weapon you want to is a huge problem. Halo's weapon sandbox was never made for this, and the balance goes out the window. It doesn't help that the weapons were already imbalanced even for a Halo game to start at launch. The DMR was comically overpowered, the battle rifle was a 5 burst for whatever reason, and since you could choose your secondary, you could spawn with a plasma pistol so you could always do noob combos, or, even better, you could spawn with a shotgun. Why? Fuck this bolt shot. This thing is the stupidest weapon they could have added. Now imagine in Halo 3 if you could spawn with any weapon you wanted, and you could spawn with a Mauler as a secondary. That would be kind of a big problem. Now imagine that Mauler has twice the range and it can get headshots if it wants. Yeah, that's effectively what they did with the Halo 4 bolt shot. I don't know why they let people spawn with this thing. It's a pseudo power weapon and entirely breaks the melee, gun, grenade triangle that Halo is known for. If you go to melee someone, there is always a risk they're going to have a bolt shot, and they probably do. Hey, you like people putting themselves in really terrible positions in Halo Reach and then sprinting away, right? Well, everyone has sprint now. Have fun dealing with that. Halo has always been about controlling power positions on the map and controlling power weapons. Well, with Sprint, a lot of that just doesn't even matter anymore. Speaking of, you like knowing what power weapons are on the map at any given time, right? So you can kind of predict what's going on? Well, too bad. Everyone gets a certain amount of points, and then when they get that amount of points, they can call in any power weapon they want at random. The at random part is the biggest issue with Halo 4's multiplayer. A big reason why Halo was so competitive is because everything is predictable. Everyone spawns with the same weapons. Weapons spawn at the same place on the map at any given time. You can control them, you can move throughout the map, everyone is on equal footing. And Halo 4, this is just gone. Oh, and you know Bloom, right? The thing everyone really hated in Halo Reach? Well, thankfully they didn't bring that back, but now you don't get descoped. Cool. To be entirely honest, if the game wasn't named Halo 4 and instead was named Call of Duty Sci-Fi Edition, it might not be bad. But considering this is supposed to be a Halo game, it just doesn't work. Quickly, what I realized at the launch of Halo 4 was that 343 did not value what we valued in a multiplayer game. They wanted to experiment with things that nobody wanted. Thankfully, they realized that this was a massive mistake after the huge backlash Halo 4 got, and Halo 5's multiplayer, no matter how much you hate the campaign, the multiplayer was damn amazing. And that's the reason why I say Halo 4 is the worst Halo game. I value multiplayer more than campaign. It's what I'm going to be playing for hundreds upon thousands of hours after I beat the campaign. I'm not going to just play the campaign over and over again as much as I'm playing the multiplayer. The funny thing is I remember going to the midnight launch for Halo 4, being somewhat excited about it. At the time I lived pretty close to a local GameStop. That local GameStop was in a strip mall, and just across the parking lot was a Walmart also doing that midnight launch. Yeah, I went to that Walmart, got my copy immediately with like 10 other people, went back to GameStop and there was still a huge line. Suckers. Anyway, moral of the story is that Halo 4 is just not a Halo game as far as multiplayer is concerned. They experimented with a lot of things that have no right being in this franchise. There was one more thing they tried to do. Spec Ops. Was it called Spec Ops? I don't even remember. There was an extra co-op mode that was supposed to add an entirely new story. And while that's interesting and you get a lot of new cutscenes and whatnot, the actual gameplay for it was, god, mind-numbingly boring. These co-op missions were basically the same missions repeated over and over again, except for sometimes you do one in reverse. They really weren't very fun. I seriously have nothing more to say about it. That's really all this mode was. If you want to, you can go to YouTube and watch all the cutscenes. You'd have a lot more fun doing that than actually playing the mode, to be honest. Yeah, I don't think there's anything more worth mentioning when it comes to that mode. So, is Halo 4 the worst in the franchise? To me, yes, without a doubt. This multiplayer is so ungodly bad that it's worse than Halo 5's campaign. That's genuinely how I feel. I loved Halo 5's multiplayer, and that is more than worth it for me. Halo 4's campaign is not really worth it for me, and the multiplayer is terrible. So to me, it's the worst. Thanks to all of you that joined me over on Twitch while I was streaming Halo 4. We marathoned it all at once, only took around 4.5 hours, not the longest of games. If you want to follow, my Twitch is twitch.tv/JarekTheGamingDragon. If you subscribe, you get to see my videos ahead of time. Thanks all of you guys for watching this video, and I'll see you next time.